Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm pleased to be here and happy to see so many of you online for this topic of advanced care planning and its relationship and impact on grief, loss, and bereavement. So today our learning objectives are really threefold. To gain an overview, if you're not already aware of or wondering what this is, we're going to do an overview of the elements of advanced care planning. And the learning objective for that is that you might be challenged to plan for your own future health and personal care wishes. And I may add that you may do it as well as maybe with family members or loved ones that you haven't had the conversations with. And lastly, that you would be inspired to prepare to live well and die well. So I acknowledge that today's topic is, as we're often talking about death and bereavement in this series, these aren't always conversations we talk about over coffee, but I would hope that today you'll be encouraged to do so and to think for yourself what matters most in your world and ongoing daily life. So I invite you now, if you would just, when the poll pops up, is just to rate your current knowledge or level of understanding on today's topic around advanced care planning. There's no knowledge, you're not at all knowledgeable, very knowledgeable, or somewhat knowledgeable. And it's great tracking so that you can see who our audience is. Oh, it's fabulous. I love the diversity. Some who are not familiar at all. I hope this is a great learning time for you, somewhat familiar and very knowledgeable. So we have a great range of knowledge and users, and I'm suggesting probably a great variety of people who've lived and walked through the journey of advanced care planning and death and dying. So that we're on the same page, thank you for sharing that poll. I just want to give an overview of what advanced care planning is. Now, as you know, in the BC Centre and other organizations, you may have heard around advanced care planning. Advanced care planning is part of life planning. It's just as important as financial and estate planning. And we know life is complicated and full of ups and downs, but to make life easier, most people do some kind of planning for themselves. So maybe it's vacation, maybe it's hopefully to ever buy a house or a piece of property or estate. We plan financially for university or a vacation or the purchase of a new car. You plan to appoint an enduring power of attorney to manage those finances. Well, health and personal care is part of future planning as well, and they include knowing and expressing your wishes and appointing a representative. So personal planning, just so you know, personal care planning can certainly include living arrangements, exercising, driving, commuting, who you have contact with, cultural traditions, clothing, foods, nourishing, your lifestyle, personal care. But healthcare planning is planning for the changes that may come in your health. So making decisions for something, even though it's not known or not anticipated, so that you can speak for yourself and have a sense of advocacy and being able to share what your wishes are with others so that in the event they need to speak for you, they would also know what your wishes are. Advanced care planning, as we speak of it, is really by definition the process of thinking about your values, beliefs, wishes for your future health and personal care, and sharing them with the people that you trust. It can include choosing who could make care decisions for you if you could not. So we talk about the elements of advanced care planning as think, talk, plan. 3 simple words you can think of. So think about what matters most to you and who could make healthcare decisions for you if you could not. Talking about this with the people that you trust, your substitute decision maker or the person you choose, and your healthcare providers. And then the last part is planning, to actually record your wishes, share that plan with the people you trust and your healthcare providers. We won't get into all the details of the how-to today, but advanced care planning can help you get the care that's right for you, even if you are unable to speak for yourself. Did you know advanced care planning is for everyone, age 19 and older? And this includes people who live active lives. I would suggest most of us have a life we're living. There's activity levels in it. Some of you participate in sports and even high adrenaline activities. You should be doing some advanced care planning. But anyone who lives with a life-limiting or serious illness, anyone who thinks that their family may have different values or beliefs than yours, and their family may not be able to support your healthcare choices. And advanced care planning should be done with anyone who lives with a prognosis of dementia or other cognitive limitations that may lead to a loss of capacity to make or share your own decisions in future setting. So figuring out what matters most to you is an ongoing process. It gets easier when we start the conversation. The sooner, the better. Next slide. We would say when to do advanced care planning, the sooner, the better. We don't know what happens. Life happens. We often will say life happens. You know, I didn't get to the bank closed, or I missed this appointment, life happens. But when life happens in a medical crisis or a situation that's unexpected, that's the kind of life happens that we're generally unprepared for. So considering advanced care planning is, first of all, if there's an upcoming surgery or procedure, if there's a change in your healthcare status, if there's a change in your relationship status, if you have children or grandchildren, perhaps they're part of your decision-making team, if you're retiring, if you're buying or selling property, but most especially if a serious illness or a medical crisis happens, or if your health declines. These are all occasions of when to do and when to revisit your advanced care plan. Today, we're going to focus a little bit on the benefits of advanced care planning. We will say over and over, advanced care planning is for you. It's for me personally to give advocacy, agency to the things that matter most to me. And when I share that, I give my voice to someone else, and I choose someone else to speak on my behalf should there be an occasion when I can't speak for myself. This allows me, first of all, to decide what's important to me, can bring me peace of mind, and then focusing and sharing on my family and caregivers and friends. Advanced care planning is a gift, and this is a gift that you can give your friends and loved ones. Perhaps it's not the package you think you're going to get on your birthday or the surprise package under the Christmas tree, but if you think of this as a gift that you are going to bequeath to your family and your loved ones, it will help them know what matters to you. When a crisis happens, often it's an emotional setting of chaos, difference of opinions, and can be very chaotic. An ACP can help limit the disputes or confusions about what your healthcare wishes would be, and the person that you appoint as a decision maker would be able to communicate better for your healthcare with the healthcare team. And then lastly, the gift of advanced care planning lets your healthcare providers know what kinds of things are important to you. What are your cultural beliefs? What are your values? And how might they affect your care decisions? What kind of life supports or interventions would you want to receive or refuse? What kind of treatments would you want to receive or refuse if you had the need for and could express capacity for those decisions? So we say that advanced care planning is a gift. Truly, I hope that you'll be able to see some of that today as we talk about the implications of living and dying with or without an advanced care plan. Tying into today's theme, you may already know that April 16th is National and North American International Day of Awareness. Advanced care planning is April 16th. And just a little tidbit here, it's in the month of April, so it's targeted then to align with, if you don't already know this, April 15th is a tax deadline in the US and April 30th is a tax deadline in Canada. The idea is while we're reviewing our finances and while we're doing our life planning, this is also a key time to look at your healthcare planning. So for the past 9 years, the BC Centre has invested in the public awareness campaign to challenge British Columbians to engage in the first steps of advanced care planning, Think, Talk, Plan. This year, it's a really crucial theme. If not you, who? Imagine not being able to speak for yourself in a healthcare emergency. Who would you choose to speak for you? In BC, a quick review around what happens to you if you cannot speak to yourself due to an emergency or an accident or even post-surgery or a stroke. When you arrive at the hospital, healthcare providers rely on the legislated hierarchy called the substitute decision maker to make decisions for you concerning your quality of life or quantity of life. So at the top of this potential substitute list of who could speak to you. I briefly review this. You can find this in our resources. If you don't already know this, if you had nobody to speak for you, the healthcare providers go through this list. Looking for a substitute decision maker, it would begin with your spouse or your common law, followed by your parents, followed by children, followed by siblings. Then the list goes into something of an arbitrary ranking of relatives. And at the end, the last one is a government appointed public guardian. Did you know that? Yes. A government appointed guardian could end up making decisions of whether or not to support you with treatments or life care supports or pull a plug. This means it's super important that you make your wishes known before they need to be known. No one wants a stranger, no matter how important or how well-meaning they may be, to make decisions about your end of life. The worst possible scenario is if no one is prepared to the circumstances and a person is not available to speak on your behalf, there will always be a provider for you appointed to make healthcare decisions for you. However, it is incredibly stressful and difficult on the healthcare providers, family and loved ones that may come alongside to guess what the patient or you as a patient might have wanted in a state of crisis. And it's very unfair and difficult for someone else to make a decision for you. A quick poll and information about advanced care planning in British Columbia. That next slide, please. Through a 2020 survey that the BC Public Opinion Poll was conducted through the BC Centre for Palliative Care and conducted by the Mustel Research Group, indicated that in British Columbia, 76% of British Columbians agree it's important to talk about what matters most for their future healthcare. We all say it's important. Statistically, only 33% have heard of advanced care planning. 48% have had a conversation with their family. Only 14% have had a conversation with a healthcare provider. Less than 30% have documented or recorded their healthcare wishes. The statistics from 2020 haven't moved that much. What percentage category do you find yourself in? Next slide. Though this may seem a bit of an academic slide with some content, I think it was really helpful for us to understand leading causes of death. There are about 4, as you can see from this pie shape. The majority of deaths in Canada occur from frailty, comorbidity, dementia, followed by organ failure, cancer. So people may live for a long time with these conditions, but each condition typically has different trajectory or a path. So as you can see on the right side of the screen, with a cancer trajectory, there's often a time of treatments and stability and a trajectory of health and life and management of it to a point where there's critical failure and death. With comorbidities, frailty, and dementia, we'll often see a longer progressive timeline, living with a life-limiting disease until death. With organ failure, it can suddenly have episodes where the health declines with periods of rebound, and then a decline, and then a rebound. Yet each cycle effectively diminishes the overall health, but again, over a period of time until death. The fourth noted cause of death is sudden, unexpected illness or a sudden event that causes death. Why am I showing you this? I suspect that many or most of you have experienced the loss or the death of a loved one or a family member or a friend. I personally have had last year quite a year having the loss of my mother and my sister and 3 good friends and a lifetime friend of my husband. It's been quite a road. Each one of the scenarios of their illness and trajectories of illness to death pose very different grief work for us and for me. Reflecting on the grief journey in and throughout a crisis or a prolonged illness is something I didn't expect, certainly in the year, tumbling one behind the other. From the first phone call to the news of a diagnosis, grief happens. Hearing or watching or participating alongside as a caregiver and watching a loss of capacity, a loss of mobility, the inability to speak or communicate anymore, can't participate in family events, it's a grief cycle. But what happens to you as a family member through the grief and loss unto the end at death? There's all kinds of grief that shows up. Anticipatory grief, just watching this, knowing that life is coming to an end, life is changing, the situation, this person might not be here anymore. The relationship that we had is changing. They're no longer engaging with in a full conversation. They can't be mobile. They're in pain. They're suffering. And we know the end is coming. Then there's this ambiguous grief, like just watching someone go through it. And it's perhaps someone with sustained brain injury or capacity for a prolonged period of time that's been gone. The person has changed. They're no longer who they used to be. I'm yearning for what was. I'm sad. I'm angry. I may hibernate. I may go into depression. All of these are losses, and losses that affect how we show up, how we live, and then bereavement. When the illness is done, our loved one is gone, they have passed away and they are dead. Now, how do we move forward? There's so many ways that grief shows up, but so do our coping mechanisms. I'm not an expert on grief. My own experience, as probably many of you. Here's a couple things I know. You don't get over grief. You don't get through grief. But I've learned to get to know grief. And I've got to know grief in each of the cycles and walking along and getting through, and each day by day, there's a new revelation about grief and there's a new opportunity in the story ahead. I'm sharing this as a transition because I think one of the things that has made it so much easier is knowing what my sister and my mom wanted in their life. And what they wanted in their life was quality of life, but not length of life. And from there was a whole array of decisions that we could make around their care that was particular to them. So I want to invite you at this point to just ask a question. I'm going to ask you a question and give you an opportunity to reflect. Have you experienced the death of a loved one who had made their values, wishes, and their healthcare wishes known by way of an advanced care plan? How did this knowledge impact your grief or loss for your bereavement journey? On the flip side, have you experienced the death of a loved one without the knowledge of care or understanding of their values and beliefs? Perhaps you were the caretaker. Perhaps you ended up being the family member who had to make decisions as a substitute decision for them. How did living without this knowledge impact your grief, loss, or bereavement journey? I want to just give you a few minutes to reflect. And if you would like, I welcome you to put a couple thoughts in the chat, recognizing, of course, this is quite voluntary, but how has an ACP impacted your grief journey? I recognize it's a big question. If you're willing to share, we're just going to stay on this slide right now for a minute. Esther, thank you. So without an ACP, noting that Ava says there's a real heaviness, no closure, and guilt. So perhaps that guilt is around whether or not you made the right decisions. Did we intervene? Many questions around perhaps, did we do enough? Did we do the right thing? A little bit of both. Thank you for this. Thank you. It was good to know that we were following our loved ones' wishes, even though the decisions to made were tough, were hard. Yes. Yes. Before made, my Aunt told that she was going to give up and stopped eating and drinking. She died in 2 weeks. She was 85. So some of the things that we talked about: conflict in the family, difficult for families, for siblings to negotiate. So family conflict, negotiating with one another. All of these may be some of the causes that actually prolong the grief journey and the angle cycle. You know, the failures and the grief are incredibly hard. I think just know that even right now, becoming aware and learning more. Thank you for all these comments of honesty. Learning more can mean that you can invest in your future and the future of your family and loved ones. What I hear is and see as a theme of the difficulty of the journey, navigating the journey, even with knowing the values and beliefs of a loved one. The crisis, the emotions, the decisions, the life-changing impact is difficult. Be gentle with yourself. We cannot be aware of all planning wishes, especially when death is quick. Continue to drop your thoughts and chats in there if you wish. We really respect that you take an opportunity to share. Thank you. As you continue to share, I just want to remind you that is why we call advanced care planning a gift. Given the enormous advances of research and pharmaceuticals and interventions and treatment options, it actually may appear that we can avoid death or even cheat death. And modern medicine and technology can prevent death from coming too soon, but it can also actually delay its timely arrival. I just want to add a quote here from Dr. Larry Bingham in his book, Death Interrupted, How Modern Medicine is Complicating the Way We Die. He says, doctors and healthcare providers need to guide, inform, and speak directly of the circumstances at hand to help the family and the caregivers make informed decisions. For persons who show up at ICU rather unexpectedly with no documented wishes or having had a remarkably few conversations with anyone about how they wish to live and die, the reality is more and more common for doctors to be left unable to liberate from the confines of their hospital bed and present patients with a choice, either to live out their days supported by machines until they die of a complication or make the decisions to turn the machines off and die in peace. So advanced care planning is thinking, talking, and planning for your future health and personal care. And I hope that today you would receive the gift that we're going to give you, and that is a conversation to begin with your family and your loved ones. Just a quick note that any of the resources that we have at the BC Centre, we'll drop this link in the chat that you can access our resource hub. And we have many resources that are downloadable. You can find them in 4 languages there. We have English, Punjabi, Hindi, simplified, and traditional Chinese language, so that you and your family and caregivers can begin a conversation. And as well, to talk more about what happens about the impacts of with and without an advanced care plan, there's a video series, The Stories of Peter and Joe. We'll drop that in the links as well. And Olga, thank you for the reminder that having a gift does not necessarily guarantee a good death. That is absolutely true. But we would hope that it mitigates some of the risks and challenges, and the conversations with the doctors and healthcare providers may mean a smoother and more peaceful transition. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Josh to make introductions to our personal stories and lived experience speakers. Thank you.
Before we go to the lived experience people, I know there's some people might have some questions for you. I know one came up in the chat about if someone has multiple children, does the hierarchy go by age?
No, and we can talk more about this. Happy to answer that, but no, it has nothing to do with age. First of all, you have to be 19 years and older, have no conflict with the individual, and must be in contact with the individual within 12 months. but you must be 19 years or older and agree to be a substitute decision maker. That's the only criteria.
And then I believe there's another one. Will this presentation be accessible for teaching our staff? It will be on YouTube. So yeah, it will be. And we have some more resources on the website.
Right.
And then anyone else? I don't see any more questions in the chat. And so if there's more time at the end, we can always come back around to it. And so I will stop sharing. Okay, well, thank you so much, Melody, for that presentation and even sharing your own story. That's a lot of loss, and for you to still be here and teaching what you've learned, I think it's important, and it's beautiful that you're here and that you're able to sort of share some of your insights, because it makes it real, and that's what the point of having people with lived experience here today be able to share with us. And so I want to invite Gail and Karen up to the stage, I guess. I don't know what you call it when you're on Zoom. And what we're going to be doing is just talking with them really just about their own personal experience as we sort of move forward. So I'd like to first start asking with Gail, if you could tell me a little bit about your ACP story and the impact that it had on your grief journey. You're on mute, Gail.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. So my personal experience with an advanced care plan is from my mother's decision that she should have an advanced care plan, and how all that unfolded. And then following her death, you've been speaking about, or Melody's been speaking about a gift, and I just, that advanced care plan and how it moved through and who it affected, it really, I was so pleased that it turned out exactly the way Mom would want her death to be. And that for me, I think I was really quite free to embrace the grief journey that I was well aware of was going to come with a mother that I loved dearly and who was a friend to me, as well as a mother. And so it was, in all ways, it was a real gift.
Okay, I was just gonna ask you a little bit more. How did that conversation with the ACP come about? I know I read a little story about what she say. She said, "Who knew dying was so much work?" Which, if you could explain that story, that'd be great.
The journey with the advanced care plan started on Mom's 90th birthday. Previous to that, she talked off and on a little bit, but on her 90th birthday, we settled down to actually making the plan, because she had a lot of friends, and they were all getting sick and going into homes. And so she knew some things that she did not want and things that she did want. And so she put forward in a very simple way her values, her beliefs, her wishes. And so we got this plan done. And then every year on her birthday, which seems sort of inappropriate, we would take a few minutes after everybody else had gone and just review to be, so that I could be assured that she had not changed her mind about anything, or that this was still exactly what she wanted. So that's where that comment came up, was that like once a year, we have to take a look at this advanced care plan. So, but when you get to be 95, you just get to say what you're really thinking. And so she did. So that was simple. It was good.
And through that process, did she ever change her mind?
No, there really wasn't anything that that she decided. In fact, she can I tell you how her death came about? It was simple.
Yeah.
A week after her 95th birthday, she was taken to the hospital with suspected pneumonia. She was only in there a couple of days, and they released her. But they were quite concerned because although she lived in Kamloops for over 60 years, she had no records whatsoever in the hospital. And she hadn't been in the hospital since she gave birth to me 71 years ago in northern British Columbia. And so that provided an opportunity for me to say, well, if you like something in her record, why don't you have her advanced care plan? And so I was able to get that in her record. And then just I don't know, not even a month later, I got a phone call one night, and it was from a ER doctor in Kamloops, and he said, I have your mother here, and I have her plan, and I understand exactly what she wants me to do. So I thought, like, wow, this really works. It's like so amazing thing that worked out that way. And she was unresponsive when he called me. She was unresponsive when he removed the breathing tube. And it was winter, and it was dark, and it was cold, and I was 2.5 hours away. He said, why don't you wait till morning and come then? And so I did, and had a day and a night with her before she died. So it was all very calm and very peaceful, and exactly what she wanted.
Wow.
Well, I'm really happy that she was able to have that conversation with everyone and to be able to have her wishes known. As you said, like it's a gift.
Right.
You're able to
Well,
have.
it's actually a gift in really so many ways. Like it's a gift to herself that she did that work. I mean, she was 90, and she had a lifetime to think about, to figure out what she did believe and value. And so to even get that done, because I know that's hard, because I did it a few years ago, and it's it's a hard job to get that down. And she did that. So she gifted that to herself, and she gifted it to her 2 daughters. And yeah, actually gifting, I think in the last couple of years, my husband did a do not resist, or not, no, an advanced care plan a couple of years ago. And then shortly after that, his doctor decided that it was time to do a MOST form, medical scope of what it is called, medical orders for scope of treatment. And we shared the advanced care plan with the doctor. And it was so perfect. He said, okay, you're saying this. So in medical terms, this is what I put on your MOST. Here you're saying that. Now in medical terms, this is what this means. So they at the hospital have a form that is in their language. And it's based on what my husband's wishes are. And also this is really good, because they don't particularly want a lot of advanced care plans on their charts. They want something that speaks their language, and this does, but it's based on the actual wishes. So it's another gift.
Well, that's really good to know. And just one last question before we move to Karen is, could you speak a little bit about your grief journey? Like, what kind of supports did you utilize as you continue to work through that?
Supports, I think, were family and friends. One of the interesting sort of spiritual connection kind of support thing was that our local hospice does a winter memory walk, and it's dark, and the whole path is lit with candles, and it's between Mom's birthday and Mom's death date. And so I go and bundle myself up in a prayer shawl that a friend knitted for Mom, and I walk this path in the dark, and the candles light my way, and it's a very, very special ritual. So So rituals really have helped. And lots of lots of other stories of other people's journeys and some quiet times. 100-mile district hospice palliative care society. We've been here about 38 years. So
That's beautiful. I like that.
yeah,
I love that they do that.
Yeah, there's opportunity for really sometimes there's like 100 people that walk that in the couple of hours that it's open, because it's usually really cold and dark and snowy, and people there's bags so that you can put a note in it, and and then hospice takes care of that in an appropriate manner. So it's very special to a lot of people for remembering and celebrating.
Okay, thank you, Gail, so much for being here today and sharing.
You're very welcome.
All right, next we have Karen, who will share about her journey. So same question, Karen, is, can you share a little bit about your ACP story and then also the impact it had on your grief journey?
Yes, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you. And as I was listening to Gail and listening to her talk about her mom, it's always an honor, and I'm always grateful for an opportunity to talk about my husband, Russ, who died 7 years ago. Russ was 57 years old, healthy, energetic, leader in the business community, a generous father, husband, and we had a pretty regular, happy life, lots going on, lots to look forward to. And I got a phone call one sunny afternoon in February from the constable of the Calgary airport telling me that my husband was unconscious and in the back of an ambulance, and to get myself to the hospital in Calgary as soon as I could. So there we were. But to add to that, my background, my professional background is in the 80s, helped start a palliative home care program in Edmonton. I worked at BC Children's Hospital with families that had children with life-limiting conditions, and often was involved in helping the families prepare for death and do these kind of things. So I had a whole professional life around end of life and grief and bereavement. And then all of a sudden, it was my personal life, and it's a totally different experience around that. So our family all got to the hospital in Calgary, and we were waiting for reports. My husband had been just stood up in the Air Canada lounge and just collapsed. Had a massive brain bleed, not a stroke, not an aneurysm. They wanted to do some investigation, and within 36 hours, they knew that there was no more Russ to come back. And he did have a feeding tube, and they had supported his airway in the ambulance, and presented the information to us and said, we'll give you some time to, think about this, you have questions and whatnot. And we came back within a couple of hours and said, I said, I don't want to say this, but we need to let Russ go. And they said, how do you know this? People can't decide this quickly. And because of my work and Russ's own sense of personal agency, we had lots of conversations. I would come home from experiences with families and talk about that. And then we would talk to each other about what we wanted. Russ was a business person and I wasn't. He was always keen to invite me to come and look at the finances and books. I always said, oh, another day, please. I'd rather be in the garden. But in terms of wishes, he had been very clear, and I knew what he wanted. But you know how they say when you've got teenagers, if you want to talk to them about sex, a good way to do that is when you're driving in the car and you're both looking straight ahead and you don't have to look at each other. Well, I don't know if he talked to I have 3 kids about sex, but when the team at the hospital asked, how do you know this? Well, my daughter said, well, my dad did this all the time. It was just at Christmas time. We were driving around and he would fake like he was an old man and like he wasn't going to have quite all his faculties together. And then he'd cackle and laugh and say, "You're never going to know if I'm okay or not." But then he turned to her and said, "Amelia, seriously, if anything happens to me, I need you and your brothers to help your mom to fulfill my wishes." And then the boys popped up and said, "Oh yeah, Dad always did that," talking to us about his wishes in the car. And then our best friends were there and they said, "We're just Russ's friends, but we also know this about Russ." So it wasn't written down, somewhere, but it was in the minds and hearts of all the people um, that were close to him. So he made it very clear and evident at 57 years old what it was that he wanted to be done if anything happened to him.
Wow, that seems like an amazing individual to also bring it up and be able to talk about it so freely. Where, like I said, like our culture, it's usually not the case where we tend to keep a lot of that stuff in. And so
Yeah.
how did, I was gonna say, and so how did that, I'm guessing, did you tell yours to him too at the same time? Like, was it like a conversation where he just talk about it himself and then go on to another topic?
Yeah, no, we would share what our preferences were. And I mean, he had more specific preferences. He grew up in Alberta and he just had a sense of wanting to be in death and to face death kind of head on. In terms of how much, if, all conjecturing, you never know till you're there. If I had cancer, I'd try it out. I'm not sure I would go to, all lengths with it. I just want to be in nature, if I can be, see the ocean, see the mountains, see the forest, like somehow be, if that is possible to, do those kind of things. So, yes, but around Russ's bedside he just was alive for less than a week after when he collapsed. The kids said to me, "So we know what Dad wants. What do you want?" Um, so I had a chance to talk to them, and it does come up from time to time. But listening to Melody, I thought I need to write this down and have it in a place that's available to them, because I guess because we've lived through it and it's just in my psyche about what it is. I need to get it outside of inside of me and a place where it's apparent to everyone.
And I think it's interesting too that he was like the role model because your kids didn't know yours, but they knew his.
Mhm.
And like,
Yeah.
did you ever think about that on like why the hesitation?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a hesitation. It just was, Russ had so much agency in directing his life, professionally. He made choices about his career. He did not want people making choices for him. So it was sort of an unusual sense of personal agency. So yeah, it is a great role model and it's a great reminder what he did, for me, for sure.
And then one of my last questions is just going to look at your grief, since we talked a lot about Russ and the impact of the ACP, but how did you get supported within your loss after Russ died?
Well, the tricky part was being a professional, a grief counselor in grief and loss, kind of separating my knowledge from my experience. And I spent most of the first 3 years having this sort of wary clinical eye of myself, looking at myself, deciding, no, you're not crazy. This is all normal. This is all what happens. But feeling the overwhelming sense of that, and no amount of knowledge changes that. But just from the very first, saying, I'll always remember that line to the doctor saying, "I don't know, I do not want to say this to you, that we need to let Russ go, but we need to let Russ go." Um, for me, there's been, I haven't had any second thoughts. I mean, of course I've had second thoughts, but if I ever have a second thought, I know it was the right thing to do, as hard as that was to do. So that was helpful. And it was helpful because all the immediate family were on this, same page with it, which certainly helped. And there's so much to grieve, so many aspects of the loss being so big that knowing that the decision about how the death happened was not equivocal. There wasn't something to mourn about that. Oh, I really wished we'd done this instead, or I wish that hadn't happened because we did or didn't do something. So that was a real release for me. And I do have other friends kind of in my age category that are widows and having to make different decisions along the journey that does impact their grief, that they weren't the decision maker or they weren't able to help move it along with a sense of all being on the same page. So that piece is huge. Yeah, and the grief is long. And I liked how you said it today, Melody, that it's finding new ways of living in it and experiencing it. And it is, as hard as it is, it's transformational.
Yeah, it is.
And so we have a few minutes. So thank you, Karen, so much for sharing and opening, our eyes to some of the stuff that you went through, and hopefully that can impact us and the people we meet as we move forward too. And so we do have a few minutes left. So if someone has a question that they want to ask, either people with lived experience or even Melody, you can just put in the chat or you can raise your hand. We don't see anything coming in yet. So there's one question I do have for whoever wants to share is, what was the most surprising thing that you found being in your grief journey?
How hard, I mean, it's just, it was always hard. And there were so many things that compounded it, just some of the ordinary nuances of life that somehow create huge complications, and how the most mundane thing can set off a cataclysm of grief and sadness and feeling like it's really hard to crawl out of that hole and that place. And wondering, there's an incredible heaviness, a cloudy horizon, and wondering, will that ever lift? And being surprised by laughing, being surprised by the things that brought joy, surprised by the kindness of strangers. Yeah, it's really a sensibility or strength to be out there and be vulnerable. You never know who's experienced something similar. We tend to want to close off, and this is, it's not appropriate to, be public about this, but I shed lots of tears in public, and it's interesting how people come alongside and help change that moment, which makes the next moment better, and you pick up and you carry on.
Oh, thanks, Karen. I see a hand was raised here, Josh, from Jan Stewart. Go ahead. You're on mute, Jan, if you're trying to participate. Or maybe you're not. Okay, there's no hand there.
Okay, so I don't see any more questions in the chat. And so we'll begin to move forward with the next end of the thing. So we have a poll, and we just want to know, basically, has your knowledge level in today's topic increased by this session? And also, does attending the Echo help you learn about the support for people? And so that's great. So they're all coming in, and knowledge increase somewhat to a lot. I think that's great. I think we only had like a 15-minute presentation, and so there's so much to learn about it. And but this is a great, I think, starter to understand that there is this information that's out there. And so if you want presentations, I know Melody's great at them. Just reach out. Let us know if your organization wants one. And so we're going to move forward to just some of the end. So I just want to again thank everyone today for presenting and really opening their hearts and just sharing a little bit of a piece about their life with all of us and strangers. We hope that everyone here today really enjoyed the session, and we ask that you complete a short survey that Esther is going to be putting in the chat. And so the registration for the next series or next session is titled Teen Grief, Responding, Rebuilding, and Relearning. And it's scheduled for Wednesday, May 8th, and once again at noon. And so you can register, you can see the link in the chat. And to be notified of any future sessions, feel free to subscribe to the BC Center for Palliative Care newsletter. And so our aim is to provide a copy of the presentation recordings and session summary notes within the next 7 working days. So please watch your email for all of that. And so as we come to a close, I'd also like to acknowledge that and mention of our upcoming All Together Symposium that is being hosted on October 4th of this year. And so they'll be hosted in person at at Vancouver, BC, at the Pinnacle Harbourfront Hotel. So this will be an exciting day of workshops, networking, and learning with noted community and healthcare experts in compassionate communities and palliative care. So right now we have a call for presentations currently going on, and it ends and closes at the end of the month. So if you're interested, feel free to submit a proposal, and more information can be found on our website. And so this is sort of the website. And just once again, thank you everyone for attending, and thank you again to our presenters for being here today.